Good afternoon. I'd like to call this session Skagit County Commissioners to order. It's a little after 3:45 on May 19th. And we are here with a work session with Public Works. Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. Last year, the board asked that we take a deeper look at ridership data and also come forward with some ideas as far as cost saving measures, which could include service reductions or changes. So we and Rachel have done a tremendous amount of work to dig into the data, and what we're showing you here today, the numbers in there are I would say estimates for discussion, and we can definitely, depending on what kind of options or ideas the board has interest in, we can definitely go dive in and do further research and analysis. But we mostly wanted to get this work session in place so we could answer questions, talk about the ridership data, what the trends we're seeing now, and potential ideas that we could evaluate further. So, I mean, with that, I'll let Rachel lead the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, commissioners. Rachel Rowe, Ferry Division Manager, Skagit County Public Works Department. Like Mike said, you had asked for some alternatives for cost savings for ferry service. With ferry service in particular, significant cost savings are tied to service levels. And I have said that before, and I'll say it again. I think that when you're looking at the type of cost savings that you're looking to achieve, there is definitely challenging, and there's really no easy answer. I certainly don't have the answer. I don't know what the best scenario is, but we have done some ridership reviews. We had met previously and you had asked to see what's happening with ridership. We've had a few things that have affected our ridership recently. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some different scenarios that could achieve some cost savings. I would like to just kind of start with a couple of disclaimers here on the work that we've done and the work that we're going to present to you today. The service scenarios we're looking at are specific to the non-peak season. So we have not evaluated the peak season. It is very different from the non-peak season. The ridership demands during the peak season are higher. There's different types of riders traveling for different types of reasons. Additionally, we have created a new database in the way that we track ridership. Previously, we have ridership spreadsheets going back to 1980 showing the ridership on the vessel, but the way that data was captured didn't make it very easy to turn into pivot tables to give you meaningful charts and graphs that you'll be looking at today. Those are the result of the work that Lee Fisher, the ferry assistant manager, has done to create a new database that's going to track ridership moving forward, creating some of the pivot tables that you're going to see today. Again, we have only been able to complete entry of the ridership for the new database from October of 2025 through April 30th of 2026.
Is that database automatic or you have to enter by hand?
We have to enter everything by hand.
They don't have anything what to do, e-ticketing that downloads or anything?
E-ticketing is, I think, a future capability of the e-ticketing system will be to track ridership. Unfortunately, the way that the e-ticketing system would require us to have timed sailing so that we're entering data by sailing into like how many tickets we've scanned per sailing. And we don't do that. We don't have time sailings. Anybody can buy a ticket for any time of day, for any day of the week, mostly for any day of the year. When the tickets are available for sale on the website. So
I was buying a ticket for the 1 o'clock sailing today. It's just for that one.
no, if you buy a ticket today, you
Well,
can,
for us, but if the system would.
yes,
That's what it was designed for. It's just, you buy a
to
ticket. For
capture
that.
meaningful ridership data, yes. At times, that's a perfect example of a time sailing.
Thank you.
This is not too labor intensive though. The ridership logs are kept by the crew that track the number of vehicles and passengers that ride the vessel. Lee every day enters that data into this database. Eventually it will be where the crew's entering it in real time on the vessel, so it's gonna cut out extra steps. So we've gained a lot of efficiencies too in the way that we're tracking ridership now than the way that we used to.
And I learned from Rachel recently that this is something the master captain's doing on the boat, right?
Mhm.
As they're like seeing how many vessels and people are on board, and that's something that's recorded, has to be kept on the boat for safety reasons. So you
And-
have your
and it-
manifest of who's on.
And it should be accessible from the shore too, so
Yeah.
it should exist electronically somewhere.
They scan the tickets, the system doesn't keep track of how many you're scanning through either.
They keep track of how many tickets you scanned for the entire day, not by the, because we don't have those time sailings.
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
only scan one way.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah.
I would also like to just say before we begin that these proposals are being put forth because we thought that they were possible scenarios. We all might disagree on the priorities or the outcomes of the scenarios, and I think we can have that conversation as we go through. And then finally, I would just like to say that any cost estimates we've made are cost estimates. If any of these proposals look good to you and you'd like us to do further evaluation, we want to reserve the right to say, these numbers are not the final numbers. So just because we set them today does not mean that if we run a cost analysis on a specific proposal, you might see different numbers. The numbers that we have gathered in this report have come from previous budget preparations and going obviously into this budget preparation cycle, which will start here soon. These numbers will look different as far as the cost per run, cost per hour, overall budget, things like that.
And once again, these are from the ferry management team and Public Works.
These scenarios here that we've identified. Yeah, these have, I mean, primarily have come from just looking at the data and thinking, okay, what could we
Wasn't
do
to
with
the
service?
crew, or it wasn't to the.
No, these are, yeah, this is our department,
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I was getting at.
recommendations.
Yeah.
Or ideas to put forward for
Thank
consideration.
you.
Mhm.
No, yeah, the public and crew didn't give us these ideas.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's run through the scenarios. Just interrupt me if you have any questions at any time or you want to discuss anything in further detail. We have a lot of information to cover in a short amount of time. I produced a report prior to this meeting and kind of read ahead materials. So you've seen this before, probably if you've read that report. Some of the service scenarios that we are covering in this presentation include cutting the lowest ridership runs. And then for each of these scenarios, we've done a couple of things. We've estimated a level of cost savings, a level of rider impact, and a level of operational feasibility. So, for example, with cutting the lowest ridership runs, that would be looking at the runs that have reduced ridership. The estimated savings on something like that, we think would be low to moderate. The rider impact would also be low to moderate because these are sailings that already are not frequently used by either vehicles or passengers. And the operational feasibility would be high. So operational feasibility, how easy would this be to implement without major changes to the structure of the ferry division? So in this case, cutting those lowest ridership runs has a high operational feasibility because it doesn't impact, for example, the union contract or the number of employees that we have. It would change how they're scheduled. But again, we believe that the operational feasibility of this is high. The other options here include reducing the frequency of the run. So right now we pretty much sail on a 30-minute round trip schedule. We are not having these 30-minute sailings sail at full capacity. So we think that if you were to reduce the frequency from 30 minutes to say 45 minutes to an hour, we would have more time to ticket, more time to load. Therefore, instead of having 4 people on each shift, we could have 3 people on each shift. Anytime you're talking about cutting salaries and wages, you have the potential for high cost savings. The rider impact, however, would be high because you wouldn't be doing as many runs. The benefit, though, to the rider would be that you can still start early in the morning and you can still operate until your regular time in the evening. So you're not cutting, usually it's with the lowest ridership runs, you're talking about your first couple of runs of the morning and your last couple of runs of the night. You still maintain those because that's when your commuters and your families are using the ferry. People who work off island are traveling usually on those first 2 or last 2 ferries.
Is this something where if you had like an unusually large number of cars waiting, you could throw in an extra run in the middle of the hour, squeeze something in on occasion, or would that become very challenging with 3 people?
I think if you went to hourly intervals, that could be possible. If you
Yeah.
go to 45 minutes, you wouldn't be able to do that. So there would be some strategy there if that's something you wanted to be possible.
We've
Um,
definitely seen where, like during the lunch hour where we do that double, it creates an expectation that we can then just, do these extra runs, which creates problems for staff taking breaks and, costs as well.
Yeah, we definitely have to make it crystal clear. This is we had more cars than we can get across, and we happen to have the staff to do it in this moment. It doesn't mean that it's gonna happen every time.
Where,
Yeah,
where is the cost? Is it the cost the employees or the cost the boat itself running? What proportionally what's the comparison there?
It's primarily due to salaries, wages, and fuel costs, which are known as the variable costs of our operation. And we'll talk about that on the next couple of slides, but
Okay,
the report that I had given you kind of went over variable costs being salaries, wages, benefits, fuel, consumables, specifically like lube oil and filters and things. Doing fewer runs would mean lowering those costs. Those costs are about $282 a run. So if you think about every round trip sailing, you have a variable cost of $282. Every sailing that you cut or every round trip that you cut, you're cutting $282 worth of cost.
that's fuel and consumables.
And wages and benefits.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
but still the people are there, so they're gonna be sitting, waiting for the ride, so.
But instead of having 4 people on each shift, now you're having 3 people on each shift. Because you're not doing that 30-minute turnaround like you were needing somebody on the shore selling tickets while the vessel's sailing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you were to go to 45 minutes or hour intervals, you could reduce a staff person on each shift. That savings would be
Okay.
higher than the, typical cost savings. We've talked a lot about the 12-hour day. This is being included in here because of the number of times that it's come up. It's very similar to cutting the lowest ridership runs. Right now, our first sailing of the day on a weekday is 6:30 a.m. and our last sailing is at 8:30 p.m. If you cut the low ridership runs on either end, you're probably operating 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So this scenario is very similar to those, but I included it because it's been talked about so much and I didn't want to not include it and have it be asked about, so.
But you just don't jump up to the boat and start, there still has to be ramping up and ramping down, so you're supposed to be more, if they're 14-hour day.
They can't work a 13 or 14-hour day, so Coast Guard rules only allow them to work 12 hours in a 24-hour period. So if your shift is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., your first boat is at 7:30 and your last boat is at 6:30.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
really the operating window of the actual runs people can ride on is shorter than 12 hours. This assumes keeping those 30-minute intervals. And in fact, if we were to go with a 12-hour day, I would recommend even looking at what we could do over that lunch hour. So we have, instead of a possibility of a second 11:15, just a scheduled run in there. So the sailing schedule on any of these can be adjusted to accommodate, and I think it would need to be. When I talk about operational feasibility, I did not include the process for changing the sailing schedule, which likely include a public hearing. So that in and of itself is not included. The operational feasibility is like, can we make it work and how would I staff it and how would I run it? Not how would I get to a decision from you about it. That's a whole nother process that has complexities that are not
Or
included.
how do we negotiate with the union?
Exactly.
When it impacts our labor agreement.
Exactly. So if something has a medium operational feasibility, it has some considerations to some things having to do with union contracts. That leads perfectly into holiday service reduction. So the ferry operates on every single holiday. We operate 365 days a year on holidays for our regular full-time staff. In addition to their holiday pay that they're getting time and a half on the vessel when they work. We do have full crews on those days. So the estimated cost savings, if you were to completely reduce holiday service, would be very high. However, the rider impact would also be very high. And the operational feasibility would be medium because again, those holidays are promised in the union contract. So there would be some negotiations that would have to take place. If you don't do anything with the ferry service and you want to keep operating at the cadence that we are now with the amount of staff that we are now, we're likely to see more fare adjustments in the future in order to meet our goal for the revenue target. Fare adjustments, don't come with a lot of cost savings. They have a high rider impact, and the operational feasibility is always lower. I called it medium just because of the fact that, we're kind of always chasing this revenue target that it feels like we're never gonna reach. Other things that we looked at are fairly minor, but kind of have to do with operational efficiencies. We talked about that second 11:15 sailing. With fuel costs having gone as high as they have, it may not make sense to run a ferry across the channel with only 2 cars on board. Sometimes there's only 2 cars that are left behind. Sometimes those 2 cars are left behind on Guimas. So they're not even paying it. They've already paid their fare to go over. So that's not even a revenue run coming back. We also operate hazmat service. These hazmat providers, being propane and gasoline that deliver essential services to the island, have other options. Many ferries don't allow hazardous materials in bulk like we do. There is a cost that comes with compliance with those programs, such as training for our crew, security plans, hazardous materials manifest. That all can go away, that cost. Again, they do have other services available, so the rider impact is low as far as the riders using that hazmat run. Also, it opens up another run to people who want to use the ferry for other reasons. The hazardous materials companies that use our vessel, even though we do have other options, they like our boat because we provide them with a schedule. We take them over at 9:15, we pick them up at 2:30. And with these other services, they may not know what time they can get to the island, and they may not know what time they're gonna
Be
get back.
cheaper.
Slightly, it depends. I've asked Corey and he's given me a different number every time I've asked him, so I can't tell you whether we're cheaper or more.
Already.
Well, we dramatically raised our rate, didn't we?
I'm sorry.
Didn't we dramatically raise our rate this year?
Hazmat.
We did to cover because we were charging before what it would cost a 35-foot vehicle to travel on the ferry, which didn't even come close to covering the costs of the compliance programs alone. And then we were also allowed a markup through RCW that we applied to that as well. Our goal is not to be competitive or take service away from private operators. But I would say at the time, we figured that we were priced just slightly lower, not so much lower that I think if it weren't for the schedule conveniences, they might consider these other options. And they're welcome to do so. The operational feasibility of discontinuing the hazmat service is high because we just eliminate that run, turns into a run for riders. The bigger impact would be to those companies.
Yeah.
Any questions on this so far? Okay. I wanted to show, kind of looking back to 2018, what we've seen with ridership. So this is annual vehicles and passengers between 2018 and 2025. In 2019, 2021, and 2023, we did have dry docks. So you might see a few kind of dips in those years. 2020, the dip in passenger ridership was obviously due to COVID-19. And in 2025, you start to see kind of what we're experiencing today, where our walk-on or passengers in vehicles has dropped by about 40,000. Our vehicles have dropped by about 60,000. In 2025, we had 2 contributing factors. One was a 10-week dry dock that was supposed to be 6 weeks. The other was a 30% fare increase. Prior to the 30% fare increase in 2025, we did adjust fares in 2023, but by 15% for 23 and 24. We did a capacity study in 2017 for the new vessel where Glosson looked at what our ridership was going to do over the 40-year life of a new boat. And at that time, our ridership was actually trending upwards. So they looked at what ridership had done 1980 to 2017, and they figured the next 40 years would kind of follow the same trend line and showed kind of an increase. But what we've actually seen happen since 2018 is a downward trend. This chart shows each year and the ridership by month. You can see the ridership always peaks in the summer, June and July. but that the overall trend of the vehicle ridership is going down. Same with passengers, not quite as dramatically, but slightly.
Number of passengers.
The trend line, I guess, is just, it hasn't decreased as much as the
Passenger tickets.
Well, one thing we've seen since the fare increase in particular is an increase in ridership or passengers in vehicles, just because the cost of a vehicle and driver went up so much. Although I can't say that that's exactly what was happening between 2018 and 2023, because we didn't increase the fares during those years.
But with the passenger only graph you have here.
Mhm.
Because we had such a long haul out in 25, they were passenger only, so they would have been a plus on the passenger only, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that would have been in March and April of 2025.
Yeah, April, May.
But it's included in there on the passenger only,
It is, yes, all those passengers are counted.
but obviously the cars were not, because there weren't cars, so.
Right, they dropped to 0 during those months.
Commissioner Burns, you have any question on any of that so far?
No, I'm good right now. Thank you.
Any of-
Anything?
Oh, sorry.
No.
Any of these other decreases in ridership for the vehicles, particularly in this graph, in 2019, in March would have been due to a dry dock, same in 2021 and in 2023. 2024 was the year that we were out for the damage to the outdrive over the New Year's holiday. Okay, and then this is where we get into what we didn't have possible before Lee's new database was to basically drill down to what's happening with ridership by sailing. So these graphs are broken down into kind of how we think about the sailing schedule. So Monday through Thursday, we always have the same sailing schedule. We operate from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. So what you're looking at on this chart is that very top blue line is the total amount of vehicles that we can carry. So we have a max capacity of 21 vehicles for each sailing. The pink shaded part and the line just above the pink shaded part at 10.5 shows when we're sailing at 50% capacity by vehicle. The bars in the graph, the gray bars are are they the northbound or the southbound? I can't see the. Gray is northbound, peach is southbound. So northbound is going to Anacortes, southbound is going to, northbound is to Guaymas Island, southbound is to Anacortes. So on the 6:30 a.m. sailing, and this is an average of the entire non-peak season, so from October through April. On the 6:30 a.m. sailing, we had an average of 2 vehicles northbound and almost 12 vehicles southbound. We very rarely operate at over 50% capacity on an average weekday. Of course, we have runs where we sail full, but this is an average of all of the sailings over the non-peak season. Lee, is there anything you would add to this chart?
No, I think, there's always potential that we can dig deeper and get you more specific numbers. This is very dynamic. So if you have any further questions, we can get back to you. Very specifically back to you.
What we're seeing is that, these low ridership runs, when we talk about reducing the sailings with the least amount of capacity, I think it's really obvious here which sailings those are. They're the early morning and late evening sailings.
As we talked about earlier, if one were to change the interval from 30 minutes to say every hour, in theory, the same vehicles and people are gonna travel, it's just gonna bump up those lines to be above the 50% capacity.
Well, that's a really good point.
That's actually what I was gonna ask, is there any chance you could just model? Split the half hour intervals and just look at how many times are we gonna hit max capacity for the boat? If you started cutting all these runs, cutting half of the runs out of the day.
Like make the assumption
Yeah, just.
and then squish the
That was the word
ridership.
to double up.
Yeah, essentially you just.
Yeah,
split
yeah,
the half
that's
hour.
more theoretical, so it's not something that I can dynamically do on a pivot table, but I could probably do a theoretical
Yeah, I know.
study on the side.
Perfect, just kind of gives us an idea of how many runs are we not gonna be able to make it work in a single run in an hour, where you're
Mhm.
obviously gonna have to either
Yeah.
double up or have people wait, and then the
Mhm.
cascade effect of how long until there's not people waiting.
Mhm,
We don't wanna turn into washed where you're waiting 6 hours to take a ferry, but.
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and the other goal of this exercise was to retain the revenue that we have today. Because there was a time in previous budget cycles when asked, what would service cuts look like? I would have told you that it would have reduced revenue. Until now, when ridership has dropped this dramatically, I actually think that there is reason to believe, and I think these charts prove that you could, and the goal should be, if you're able to operate more efficiently, but maintain your revenue so that you've still got the same people riding just at different times of day. That should be the goal. The other way that we think, or the other, where's my line show progressing?
Just hit them.
Oh, there we go, Friday. So we've got Monday through Thursday, and we look at Friday, Saturday, Sunday as 3 different charts. Because they have different schedules. On Friday, though, we do retain the same schedule as during the weekday, but after 8:30, we have additional runs, 9:15, 10, and 11 p.m. If you were to ask me, if we need these runs year round, I would say, I don't think you need them during the non-peak season. I think you do need them during the peak season. These are, probably mostly people traveling on and off island for recreation and entertainment, although there are few of them. Saturday nights are the same way. We have low ridership after 8:30. We have already in the non-peak season reduced the Saturday sailing schedule and the Sunday sailing schedule. We have more runs on Saturdays and Sundays in the peak season than we do in the non-peak season. But having said that, I think Friday and Saturday nights, there really is no significant need to operate past 8:30 p.m. The early runs on Saturday as well. I think you've got fewer people commuting to work, to school, things like that. Those are something that could be considered. And again, the capacity capabilities show that you could accommodate the same amount of riders in fewer runs on Saturdays. Sundays are definitely a lot slower than any other day of the week. I think if you were to consider a serious drastic reduction in your sailing schedule, Sundays would be an opportunity to do it. You have fewer runs operating at over 50% capacity than you do any other day of the week. Sundays, you're obviously gonna have more southbound traffic because you've got people, they go over on Friday, they come back on Sunday. I think even though that is the case, in the non-peak season, they're not traveling for the same reasons. They're not traveling for weddings and events and things like that, vacations and Airbnbs. So I think the non-peak season, you really have an opportunity on Sunday to reduce service. Definitely down to 1 12-hour shift, maybe even 1 10 or 8 hour. And then I wanted to just show you kind of what's happening on these second 11:15 a.m. sailings. This is broken down by the non-peak season that we were able to evaluate again, October 25 through April 2026. And this is the number of second 11:15 sailings that we did during that time. So in October, we did a total of 7. There's 30 days in a month.
Not on the schedule that are kind of a lunchtime run.
Right. In November, we did 4. In February, we did 1. This doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't cars there needing to go. There's been, historically, the 11:15 a.m. sailing has been viewed by the riders as something that we would automatically do if vehicles were left behind. A lot of times we were able to accommodate that, and we did. But now we have more requirements for training, drills, paperwork, all of the things that are on the vessel crew to do every day, maintenance, fueling. Those things are often done during the lunch hour. So in a week that you've got 3 oil changes to do, you already have 3 days that you're not gonna do a second 11:15 sailing. Plus, if you're feeling that week, there's 4 days. I think sometimes we prioritize carrying vehicles over doing maintenance, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think the priority should always be safety training, maintenance, drills, anything that we have to do to keep our vessel and our crews in compliance. So at one point, and perhaps we created this perception by the riders, we would just do an extra run if they were there because we didn't want to hear them complain if we didn't do it, right? And we'd move maintenance or we'd shift, something down the line. Now we prioritize those things because we have to, because compliance is not an option. So we are doing fewer of them. The captains also have the discretion. If they're sailing behind schedule in the morning because we had a med run or we had a stalled vehicle on deck and it started to creep into being late for other runs and it became a point where crews weren't gonna get their breaks. And that's another thing. We used to just run second 11:15 sailings and our crew would then not get their full lunch break or they wouldn't get their full rest periods. And that's also not
Nope.
something that we can negotiate. So captains now have the discretion. If there was something happened that earlier in the day that they needed to cancel the second 11:15 to get caught up, get their crew their break, do paperwork because there was an incident on board, do drills because half their crew working that day was over the 90 days, do their drills. That's also not okay. So now we prioritize those things over doing the second 11:15 sailing, and we do fewer of them.
And with Rachel and Jen's help, we've been over the last year or so trying to communicate that the second run should be expected. That, it's
Unscheduled.
yeah, it's unscheduled. Yes, that was the term. Started.
It's also, I mean, it's a
More frequently.
perception thing too. If your sailing is at 11:15 and the next one's not till 1. They're forgetting that there has to be a round trip happen between 11:15 and 11:45, and then at 12:45, the crew's gotta come back out and kind of start prepping for the 1 o'clock. So it is a longer perceived break than it is an actual break. I think there's some opportunities to adjust the sailing schedule and just get rid of this conversation altogether. Allow for enough time for a break in maintenance and design the sailing schedule around it so that maybe there's not as much time, but enough time.
Does Joe prefer doing the maintenance in the middle of the day, or would he rather come in first thing in the morning? Cause I've never enjoyed working on a hot engine.
So the way that the union contract is designed is that if they're called in outside of the regular schedule, it's overtime. So we could pay overtime for maintenance. We've had that conversation before. We could pay our crew overtime for,
Has his schedule start earlier in the morning so he can do the maintenance before the ferry crew starts.
Yeah, I'm asking
his,
if you would voluntarily
his-
want to do it.
his schedule doesn't start any earlier than the rest of the crew, and he's subject to the same
Or we
union
just choose
contract.
not to do it.
I'm sorry, what?
It's not allowed to, or we choose not to do it.
There's not enough time between the start of the shift and the first run of the morning.
We aren't allowed to change his schedule to make him do it, is what I'm asking.
Maybe
To
an
offer.
idea.
Yeah, it would definitely be a conversation we'd have with HR.
Yeah, I'll just ask him the question.
Right now, if you wanted to do it under the existing contract, it would be automatic overtime.
Even if he wanted it.
Probably, yeah.
He would have to want it because he would have to accept it. It would have to be voluntary on his part and it would be paid at overtime.
I'm not saying he would, I'm just curious, because when you said you do it in that time, I'm thinking, wow, well, those engines are gonna be piping hot, that wouldn't be too enjoyable, but I guess, he might have it set up easier than it is on a regular vehicle. It's just a question. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
I
think the
mean-
public is mostly used.
I think
To
Joe's
us.
willing to do whatever we ask him to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this a chief engineer specific conversation.
No,
It's more how the union contract is designed, and I think there's probably some flexibility there, but it doesn't come without negotiation.
Yeah, and everything, with the IBU on the collective bargaining agreement is very touchy, like we would definitely have a conversation with HR before we even approach the union employee about changing their schedule.
Yeah.
Just something drastically different.
okay, I was just curious.
Mhm.
All right, you keep going.
Okay. So this is, the second 11:15 sailing was just an easy way to cut some costs with little impact to riders.
Mhm.
The ridership on these runs is shown here. The days that we did them, this shows the total number of vehicles in northbound in blue and southbound in red. you know, certainly, I don't know why on October fifth, there was such high ridership on the second 11:15. He did inform me that there was high ridership that entire day. Although we are not really sure why. We
Was
could
this
probably
the-
get more information. There might have been a wedding. A lot of times that's the tail end of the wedding season, so I'm guessing there was a major event on the island, and being that they're all southbound vehicles, probably because they were trying to come home from that event.
Yeah, that,
Mhm.
But again, the 50% capacity is shown here as well as the full potential capacity of the vessel. Emergency services runs, I'm not suggesting cutting emergency services by any stretch of the imagination. I just thought maybe if you wanted to know what that ridership or what that looked like, this chart here shows how many emergency services trips we did in the month of October. These could be either during the regular sailing schedule or after hours. However, I will say that only 2 of these runs for the entirety of the evaluation period, October through April, were after hours. The rest were during regular service hours. They never happen on a scheduled run, however, so they're always a little bit, you know, off the schedule and tend to throw us off our schedule. And then the non-peak hazmat or the hazardous materials runs, these are runs that we do at 9:15 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. We do not allow any other vehicles and passengers on these runs, so it's only the propane and gasoline trucks. This here is showing how many vehicles were on each of those runs. So we don't do them every Wednesday since we raise the rate for the hazmat. The trucks will, they'll bring more trucks on fewer days of the month, so they might ride every other week now instead of every week. So we did the hazmat runs, for example, in October on the 8th, the 22nd, and 29th, and these show the number of vehicles that were on each of those runs.
What's the capacity on the hazmat vehicles?
Maybe 14 if they were all kind of squished in there.
Well, I'm just asking, because
Yeah, we never would reach capacity on these. I mean, the most we
what if you only ran half as many runs?
I think even then, the services that are, like, they can kind of fill everybody up for, I mean, I guess they could bring more trucks. I don't really know how their business model operates. I just know that even before we raised the rates, we never saw more than 6 of
are
these
we
vehicles
seeing
on it.
less, less on runs now with the rates up?
We're seeing more vehicles on fewer runs.
Okay.
Yeah, so they always email us on Monday before, Tuesday before to let us know if they're gonna be bringing trucks over and how many.
Okay.
So, again, I think that this chart is here to show that if you were to eliminate our hazmat program altogether, this is the number of trucks that would need to find alternate service. It's not a tremendous amount of trucks. They do have other options to get to the island.
Does Washington State Ferries allow this? So for like all the San Juan Islands, these same utility companies buying private.
These landing craft companies are
Services.
their primary transport of the bulk hazardous materials.
And we charge the same for the run if there's 5 vehicles on it or 3 or 1?
We do, they can just split the cost. So if it's one company with 3 trucks, they pay the fee. But if it's 2 different companies and they each have a certain number of vehicles, they can split that fare between the 2 companies. That's usually how we do it.
So if we had 14 trucks on fewer runs, it would be cheaper per truck.
Per company, not truck.
Well,
So if 2 companies, if each company was to bring 6 trucks, they would still split it.
And it wouldn't matter how many trucks they had.
Yeah.
The fare would
Per
stay the
company.
same.
One company could bring 6 trucks and one company could bring 1 truck and it would still be 50-50.
Mhm.
why is that?
Charged by run.
It's, yeah,
Because, well, by
Charged by
company,
run.
yeah.
So it's charged by run, and if there's 2 or 3 companies that all get on the same run, then they can split that either.
No,
in
but if
thirds.
the run costs $500 to do it, and I got 14 cars on it, 14 trucks on it, why don't I divide by 14 instead of 2 companies?
Well, that may be 3, 4 companies or 2 companies or 1 company, so.
It could have been done that way. or it could have been done
And
this
it could be
way.
done now.
And it could be done a third or a fourth way. I think that's, if you wanted to see changes to that, we certainly should look at it. I don't think that the way that we're doing it now has to be the way that we always do it. It's just the way that we decided, or you decided when we presented it to you, that it would be done. But maybe now that you have more information, you want to see something different.
Yep.
I mean, the cost is the cost for each run, regardless of how many trucks or how many companies use it on that day. So
Yeah, okay.
we're just trying to cover costs.
I know we're covering the cost, but the delivery truck is covering their cost too.
Mhm.
And if I can get a cheaper per truckload, I may want to do that because I'm gonna pass that cost on to my customer on the island.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes sense. You'd want to
So
get more
if I
trucks
can
on
get
the
in a load where
boat.
there's 14 trucks, and so my cost per truck that I'm getting over there,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna divide it by less,
Absolutely.
and so the customer's gonna get it cheaper.
We
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about.
And that can be done.
That's not what you've been doing. You've been doing just the number of companies divided by, that's what you've been doing.
Well, it's per run, so it's a
Yeah, I know
cost
it's
per
per run,
run,
I'm
and
just-
yes. The
Whatever it
companies
is,
do
600
split
per
it.
run, that's the dollar amount we're gonna.
If, when one company has 5 trucks, the other company has 1 truck, like I mean, they can split it either way. They can decide how they want to split it. We just need to collect the cost.
Actually, we just have a cost for one company or two companies, because we never have more than two
Yeah,
companies.
okay.
And usually each company has at least 2 trucks.
Yeah.
So that was how we figured it was the fairest way to do it, and there has been no complaints, except perhaps from people who are the end service receivers who have seen an increase in their bill.
But I don't know that they would see a decrease.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at this, if you want to reduce runs,
I would like to get rid of the hazmat program altogether, to be clear.
yeah, I would just reduce it to 3 or.
If we did not provide hazardous materials service,
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
fine.
we're not losing a great deal of revenue. They have other options to get to the island, and then we are not being blamed for raises in propane costs that may be passed on to the customer.
Yeah.
So,
It would definitely.
Oh, yes, you will.
I mean, I probably still will,
We
but
will, but,
But it's
we won't, will we receive the things when the rates go down?
only if they do go down.
Well, if you merge some of these ideas together, if we go to an hourly service.
Hmm.
And then every week we take one of those hours and whack it off the schedule because it's for hazmat only. Then that's gonna ripple the rest of that day.
Yeah.
For those customers who are impacted because of the loss of that mid-morning departure on the way over and mid-afternoon departure on the way back.
Well, we do have other companies too who provide, who are building over there or pouring concrete over there, who are like on a schedule. And then Wednesday morning's hazmat run will create a delay because it's at 9:15, and then there's a break between the 8:30 and the 9:15 they already had to wait for, and then they have to wait for the hazmat run. And so, depending on who I talk to, others agree that maybe we don't need to provide the service.
So that is an area we could look into more and, dive in a little deeper.
We can look at any of this. And then the last one, I think not my last slide, but close to last slide, is the holiday vehicle ridership. So like I said, we operate every holiday. Some holidays are busier than others. Thanksgiving is one of those holidays where people travel to a meal on the same day they travel home from the meal. But Memorial Day is one of those holidays where everybody waits until Tuesday to come home, right? So holiday ridership varies greatly, but what we're showing here is just the average number of vehicles on the sailings on the holidays. Again, we rarely reach 50% capacity. When we do, we never reach full capacity on average. So I think all these slides show that ridership is down significantly. Maybe you don't take the holiday away altogether, but maybe you do run a reduced schedule, like an 8-hour day on a holiday, or you start later and end earlier. Those would be options to kind of more efficiently operate holiday service, and a significant opportunity for reduction in cost due to the overtime wages that we pay our employees on holidays.
Would it save anything if you did just a short schedule in the morning, a short schedule in the evening where there's a big gap in the middle of the day?
I think so. I think that is probably less of an operational feasibility just due to union contracts and working conditions. But one of the proposals that we made in our budget reduction proposals this year at the 20% level was to do 2 5-hour shifts per day. So that you're running morning runs and evening runs to get the commuters to and from, but you're cutting midday service.
Wouldn't be received well, but
I mean, we could look at it though.
Yeah.
But
I come to the conclusion though, probably nothing we do will be received well.
That is accurate, that is an accurate statement.
If we make it free, they'll complain it's not off.
It's not free enough.
Unless you immediately announce changes to ticket prices at the same time.
Reliable, frequent, free.
No problem, I mean, to be fair, if I'm an islander and I'm thinking about a holiday, I may rather than running our holiday schedule now is more runs than we do on the average day. So we run a Saturday schedule, but we end service at 10 on a holiday. During a weekday, we shut down at 8:30. So on a day like Memorial Day where nobody's really traveling on the boat, we're running till 10. Why? Maybe it's the day after or the day before the holiday, because like a lot of people said this last New Year's. Why isn't New Year's Eve the later schedule? New Year's Day is,
New Year's Day, right?
nobody's going anywhere on New Year's
That's
Day,
true.
right?
Well, it depends on what
At
year
least
we've had breakdowns.
Exactly, well, we've been
She
very.
was so nervous over New Year's.
We have this history, Commissioner Burns, that for a couple of years in a row, the Christmas and New Year's holiday time was not favorable to the ferry.
Yeah.
They were like
Like
not
Christmas
even
holiday.
repeating like simpler
I
passages.
didn't take any time off, I didn't do anything. But I think that that's also an opportunity to maybe run the later schedule on a day we're not paying overtime wages, also accommodating people's New Year's Eve plans. And we run until 1 AM on New Year's Eve or something, you know, and not run a holiday schedule or
Half
run.
day on New Year's.
Yeah,
Day.
yeah. So I think the point is, there's lots of things you can look at and lots of things you can do. The goal was not to reduce the revenue. Because, you know, before the ridership dropped to the levels it has, in the last couple of years, I would have told you that any sailings you reduce, and in fact, I did tell you, any sailings you reduce, you're gonna have a loss in revenue. Now, I don't think it's gonna be that impactful. I think you're gonna smush those riders into a different schedule and hopefully maintain your revenue. But this
We
slide
have to
just,
maintain our revenue.
you have
Not
to.
a hopefully.
You have to, exactly. So this slide is just showing, the monthly fare box recovery versus the monthly revenue target. You know, the revenue target, has, averaged, in 2018, the revenue target was averaging, just over $1 million. Today, it's over $2 million. You know, we're never gonna reach it at the rate that we're going. Lee, can you explain the sum of actual here? I'm not exactly sure.
That's just the monthly, the sum of the actual monthly revenue
Monthly revenue.
for
Okay.
that month of that year.
So maybe it'd be better to look at this year by year, year over year. This is what's more helpful for me anyway.
Yeah, this is.
It kind of shows that the revenue target has constantly remained above where the fare box revenue has been. These figures come specifically from one report that's called projected versus actuals that Christine compiles for us. These did not come from Kayenta financial reports. This is one of those things where if we're gonna run a deeper analysis on this, I would like to just say that these are the numbers produced by the projected versus actual reports, not the Kayenta revenue reports. And you know, when we do the ferry fare revenue target report each year, we have these figures in there, and those are the ones that come from the actual Kayenta financial reports. But if you look at 2025, you know, 1.4 versus 1.9, we're $500,000 off the mark due to the reduced ridership
In 25.
in 25. Yes.
But also the extra long haul out.
The extra long haul was a specifically unique situation that contributed in my opinion, significantly to the reduction in ridership. I think any future analysis though on fare revenue and the effect of fare increases on ridership. One thing we haven't done in that respect is a really professional elasticity study. Our projections and our costs and our figures don't build in any type of elasticity because we are not qualified to assess elasticity. But that should definitely be something that maybe we have a consultant help us with in the future. I've made a recommendation for that, just to see maybe how other systems are assessing elasticity and whether or not there's any strategies that you could employ in fares. Other things you could consider would be if you've got sailings during the day where you have higher ridership, should those sailings cost more? So that hopefully you can try to even out how you're taking in your revenue over the day.
Demand pricing is common, yeah,
Yeah,
dynamic or
dynamic
demand
pricing.
pricing is common in a lot of areas.
Are there other boats near here that are doing that?
We could look into that. I
Not
think Anchor
here,
has,
but-
clients that are doing that because they have to, because that is something that Anchor provides a capability to
Yeah.
do is dynamic pricing.
Mm.
I think more you see it at zoos and,
But you need that
You need-
elasticity study data to
yeah.
feed that, I imagine.
One thing that I am not is a marketing specialist. Don't know how to tell you how to make people want to spend money on your product and want to ride your vessel.
Yeah.
Specifically in our setting.
So any of these like studies or ideas, I mean, yes, it'd be useful, it'd be good data. Obviously, it's an expense. And it's an expense that's not capital, so it's an operational expense for the ferry, which is what we received the most criticism about is the operational piece, because that impacts the rates. Formula. So it's like, yeah, we can do that, but
Here's what it's gonna cost.
yeah.
And I think, I mean, if you looked at the service that we provide and the sailing that schedule that we provide the same way. Like based on our ridership today, we can only run this many number of runs and this is what a ticket's gonna cost. If you wanted to pay more for your ticket, we could do more runs in the day. But if we also see an increase in ridership, say we bounce back from this recent, drop in ridership. Then we can always add more runs or add more sailings or add more costs, but then maybe the cost of the ticket would go up too. So I think there's lots of different ways you can think about how you price the service that you offer or match the service to the revenue that you're actually able to bring in.
When you say that if you did it, the rides farther apart, you could do it with 3 people instead of 4. That's a 25% savings and one of your largest expenses. That makes the most sense to me that then we can't care whether we're entirely convenient for them if we're gonna try to make it economically feasible. So they're gonna have to accommodate themselves to our schedule and we could do it every hour. And in that time, we could then reduce the staff by 25%. That would make a lot of sense to me.
Some of them say they used to do it with only 3 people.
Yeah.
Because of our rules and so forth, we've added the 4th.
Yeah. That's the common thing we
So
hear
what
from
are we
them.
gonna have the crew do if it's every hour run instead of 30 minutes?
Well, the way that service changes is that instead of validating tickets and loading the boat simultaneously, you're now separating those 2 activities. So if your sailing is at 1 o'clock,
You have more time.
all riders need to have their tickets validated by 12:45. And if you arrive after 12:45, you are not gonna get your ticket validated for the 1 o'clock. We are gonna go down, use 2 people to load the vessel, which is proven to be a much safer way to load the vessel, reduces accidents and incidents. Risk management agrees.
Because they validated all the tickets, now they can.
Now
all
they're
sit
gonna-
down and load the
The
vessel.
2 deckhands are gonna shift down to the vessel and load the vessel, and maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 45 minutes. I'd like to look at the activities that take place and time them out and do more of an analysis on that. I think if you're gonna reduce frequency, you obviously wanna jam as many runs as you can in there. So if that's something that you think you'd like to see more on, we can run an analysis on that.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Because we've got a lot of empty ferries. And so we have more full ferries, so. Fewer trips, more ferries, more people on each ferry. Makes more sense to me.
Are there any of the other ones that you would like us to consider? I guess
You-
I'd
you
like
could
us to
bring-
look
oh,
at
you
this
have to
list and
find
say
out,
which
yeah.
ones are an absolute no.
Yeah, which
And which
ones
ones
would
would
you
you
like
like?
us to spend some more time and dig deeper into more analysis?
Right now, I hesitate on the hazmat cut and
Okay.
the 12-hour day. For me, the only way that works is if you find where you could reduce the runs in particular days so much that you get down to the 12-hour, and that might just end up being some holidays where you see you can condense it.
Okay,
I am completely up for going for the hourly. I think that it's good to save us the money there. And trying to get it to where we are much closer to capacity on the boat, so that we are actually maximizing the runs. I think that is a good idea.
okay.
And also an hourly, I would assume, if we don't have any hazmat or don't have any medical calls or anything, we closer to being on time, leaving the dock.
Oh, yeah, there'd be no reason we wouldn't.
there'd be no reason we didn't meet the time.
Because we wouldn't be accommodating late arrivals
I know.
anymore, right? Now
Yeah.
people can show up at 1 minute to sailing time and get on the boat. With this new model, you would have to get there early or you would be early for the next one.
Which is how state ferries operate,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
very good, right?
Yeah, they couldn't care less.
I know, it's not Washington State ferries.
But the other thing is, I mean, right now, we're trying to do 30 minutes with an extra crew person, so when the ferry unloads at Anacortes,
Mhm.
then immediately the three people on the captain still stays in the boat, and it's still gonna run the engines, right?
Correct.
You're not gonna shut it down, so
No.
you still got a fuel cost of some sort, not as much, but it's still running, engine running, still running. And then the two persons get off and go collect tickets. And then they come down and get on the ferry, and so there's not gonna be any downtime at all there. I'm just trying to understand.
Is it less fuel for the ferry to be stalled than to be running?
For sure. I mean,
Well, yeah, for sure, it's for the
Somewhat.
class, but if the engine.
I'm not gonna say it's a lot, but it's a little bit. But what I would like to do to answer your questions is kind of do all these activities over a timeline so that you can see what a typical one, I like to come
Yeah,
back to you
yeah.
with this information so that you know what everybody's
Come
doing
back
in
with some
what time.
examples.
Yeah, and I can put more thought into that. Is cutting low ridership runs anything at all that you wanna look at, or do you wanna try to preserve those early AM and evening runs?
I have a hard time with it just for the idea of the people who are
Yeah.
working odd shifts. I don't want to eliminate somebody's ability to hold their job. That'll be the part that I have a hard time with.
You get a call from Miss Murphy right away. She has to be there.
And others,
Hospital 7.
I imagine there's quite a few that would, I mean,
I mean, I would need those.
yes,
early
it's a
ferries.
lower,
I know.
it's a lower ridership runs at both ends, but it's highly important to those who are riding that.
Yeah.
Versus if we keep the bookends the same, but reduce the service in between. None of it will be welcomed, but
Well, and you hate to see those commuters or those families move off the island because they are riding the ferry frequently throughout the week as well.
yeah.
I'm gonna state what has been said to me, and then I want you to tell me what was happening. I've had them claim that you added a purser to help sell tickets when you brought on the new system, but then the person's never gone away. That is their perception, is that they're paying for an extra person that was supposed to be temporary.
I see. Well, so we were operating under the model for a long time that during the non-peak season, we would run with a 3-person base crew, which is captain and 2 deckhands. When the peak season hit, and in fact, a little bit before and a little bit after each peak season, we would shift over to having an extra person on shift every day. So we would go to a 4-person crew on the AM shift and a 4-person crew on the PM shift. So that person could stay behind and sell tickets while the boat was sailing and validate tickets, so that we could stay on time. When we brought on the new online system, we added a 5th person on shift each day. People count how many people are at the ferry terminal almost on a daily basis and feel pretty much every day there's too many people there. But maybe that was causing some confusion because they assumed maybe that with e-ticketing, even before we brought on that 5th person, and that was for a very short time.
Yeah,
That was very temporary.
And that's because the public was,
We needed to teach them how to use their
Yeah.
cell phones.
yes,
And so it was an extra learning curve. We did not anticipate the level of learning curve that would be required to educate our riders on an hourly basis to ride the ferry.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, there was talk from Islanders before we did e-ticketing. If you do e-ticketing, you can definitely permanently eliminate that person that stays on the shore. We disagree because of the amount of accidents and incidents we saw on the
Yeah,
vessel when
I
we
was
only
gonna
had
bring that
one
up.
deckhand on the boat loading.
having that right level of staffing. Like when we start talking to Mary about tort claims, and you have 2 people on the vessel, parking people, it's helped quite a
Collisions,
bit.
broken mirrors, broken bumpers, I mean, you name it, we had claims. Way
So-
more than we have.
So I could compile a list of those for whenever they bring that up, so you can just go, here's why we have these people. That should take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly more about the safety of loading with two deckhands on the vessel
Yeah,
than
I
it
can
is
totally
about
see
ticketing.
that when I watched the operation.
And we never claimed that we would be able to reduce a staff member. We always said that e-ticketing is gonna add cost to the system. And it did, but it also adds a convenience that a lot of customers who aren't complaining because they're happy appreciate.
Not to mention a customer service presence that's just always there.
But were you talking about an hour run? Is that person going away or you're still gonna have somebody sitting there?
I'm gonna reserve the right to get back to you on that, so I can tell you what each person's doing and whether or not we can. I would like to know how most efficiently to use every hour. I think it's honestly probably more like 45 minute sailing times. And so again, I wanna get back to you with what each person's gonna be doing during every 5 minute segment of that 45 minutes. I think that'll help if you could see that kind of laid out. I need to lay it out in my mind. I don't know the answer to your question just yet.
And the hazmat, I just think we can have less of those per month instead of. what we have. It's-
So offer them on maybe 2 days of the month instead of every Tuesday.
If
First and third Tuesday.
Yeah, something, I don't know what it is. I mean,
Okay.
just because it looks like it's half full to me, maybe I'm reading it wrong.
I'd agree with that.
And I think the businesses will adjust.
Just like they do when we have a haul out. They have to lean forward.
Yeah.
Before we had our haul out, they leaned forward the week prior. And that was a busy run,
Right.
knowing that there wouldn't be 2 weeks of propane delivery.
Yeah.
So they can do it then.
And I'm definitely gonna be interested in, with the 45 minutes, what the staff is gonna be doing, and you're gonna do a time study to figure out what they're gonna be doing.
I'll tell you what they're gonna do every
Because I
minute
don't
of that.
want
45
people
minutes.
calling me and saying, well, they're just sitting on the dock.
We're not
Yeah.
doing anything right now.
Yeah, I
Right.
need to give you the information that you can
We said-
respond to those calls.
It's gonna be 45 minutes, and they could have gone at 25 or 30 or whatever, and
Yes,
they're
Yeah.
just sitting there waiting for the time, and then they move.
absolutely.
And I still don't understand that extra run. You're just doing it because there's a car or two sitting on the dock, that's.
11:15.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many vehicles are left behind, even if it's just one, we'll go back and get them and do the trip.
And if they do that extra run, the staff doesn't get to start their lunches down time or the same time. But then you-
They do. I think it's just more of an optics of sailing a vessel and for the cost that it is per run, when you have one vehicle on board.
But it can impact depending on
If
the
it's
day.
full trips both ways, yes, but with the reduction in ridership we've seen recently. And I think there's so much ambiguity about that run. It's like, when are we gonna do it and when are we not? I'd probably rather, when we're looking at reducing the frequency of the runs and we're running this new scenario, I think I'd rather just fill up the day as efficiently as possible.
These
rather
are
than-
scheduled runs.
Yeah. And this is the scheduled maintenance time and this is the scheduled fueling time and, things like that. So they know what to expect. Cause I think the biggest thing about that second run now is they're like, well, I never know if you're gonna do it or not.
Mhm.
Do you wanna mention that this is non-peak and what we're gonna do with the peak season?
Yeah, these would be, I would recommend that we look at, anything that we're gonna do starting with the non-peak season and then evaluate this peak season that we're about to go into at the end and see maybe if anything should be considered for peak season, but peak season right now, I would leave it alone
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, at some point, you gotta roll it out to the islanders too. Or you don't wanna roll it out, you're just gonna do it.
No, we know how that's received.
We just wanna look
Do
at
that.
one section at a time because we have the data.
We don't wanna waste our time evaluating all these scenarios if there's ones that you're absolutely not interested in hearing more about.
And the other thing, the fixed cost per run and the variable cost per run.
Mhm.
I understand fixed cost as being cost per whole year. So it's not a run basis, because we're gonna change the number of runs per year. So the fixed cost should be so much per month, so much a week. That's how I look at fixed cost.
Okay,
So if the boat doesn't run at all, you have a certain amount of fixed cost per that day or that month or week.
correct.
And if you change the number of runs, then obviously your fixed costs go down because you have more runs, but that's how I look at the fixed cost part of it, but that's,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Got the number of runs per,
I think you meant to say the variable costs go down, but the fixed costs stay the same. I think I was tracking,
okay.
yes,
There's
I,
certain fixed costs that you broke down and that's.
We just
what
break it,
happens
yeah.
for the year, no matter what.
yeah,
So when you break that down.
by run,
It's not really accurate because you may adjust the number of runs to adjust that cost per run.
right, yeah.
So we need to know, we need to think about how to explain that to the.
Well, it's just so much per
public.
month or so much per week, this is what it costs to run. For,
Yeah.
it's a fixed cost, that's the fuel, that's insurance, that's all.
Yeah, which won't change if you reduce the frequency. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for this, I appreciate the information. Hopefully we gave you enough. Tom, what do you have?
I don't know, did we touch on holiday service reduction? I kind of
That's
was,
something we wanna look closer at.
yeah, I was going through here and it looks like we touched on everything else but that one.
Like potentially go down to one shift on a federally recognized holiday.
Or at least a reduced schedule on holidays.
Commissioner Browning, anything on that? I think on, depending on what it is, I mean, 4th of July, everybody's coming out there, want to get the whole weekend or day, but depending on the day of the week it is, the rates are different time.
And we could consider Thanksgiving versus Veterans Day, right? I mean, so I think maybe if we give you a breakdown of holiday by holiday, what the ridership looks like, you could make decisions based on actual
cherry pick
ridership of holidays on the,
Yeah.
More
Commissioner Burns, you have any
accurately.
thoughts on that? I think you need to look at it, but I don't know.
I'd say look at it. The only concern I'm gonna carry on, is the nurse that he mentioned, for example, those people who do have to get to work and probably aren't getting the day off just because it's a holiday. It's kind of like people operate our boat.
Her husband, get her over there.
So,
It's,
you know, and maybe it's a good excuse for her to take the day off.
no, you're
I don't
right.
know.
well, that's a good point too. People still need to commute.
Yeah, there are certain things that makes it difficult.
Maybe it's
but-
not,
Yeah, like our ferry workers are working at home.
Yeah, so, but I'd still be curious ridership and if we could get away with that, if it's something like. Where taking away from New Year's Day and moving it to New Year's Eve, a lot of people would probably be quite happy about that.
Right.
or maybe what's the least, volume holiday of, if we started small.
Yeah, and again,
Like-
we're not looking at the peak holidays, so
Yeah.
Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, those
Mhm.
all, and in between, those are all still stay for now.
So we can look into that one more too.
That's easy.
Anything else we didn't cover? Get good direction?
But that
Yeah.
is something I think we changed over time. It doesn't need to be happening this year. We could look at that very specifically this year and see what the holidays look like and then determine that.
How would you like us to come back to you with this information?
I think another work session worked. Okay.
And going on books.
I think the other thing is, when I was first elected, 08, they changed the schedule. If you come back with what the schedule was in 08, because it was like 6:30 at night or something was the last run before. I don't know if you remember all those, Rachel, but there was much shorter number of runs per all the time.
There basically was one 12-hour
That's what it
schedule a
was.
day, but then the ridership after those 12 hours was, the demand was so high that the crew was staying 13 hours, 14 hours, 15
They're
hours.
not supposed to.
That's where the 12-hour rule came from. And
That's the
then,
Coast Guard.
yeah, and then in 2006, they boosted it so that during the weekdays, we were operating until 10 PM. And then after the end of that 2-year trial period in 2008, they said, not very many people are riding after 8:30 PM on the weekdays, so that's how we kind of landed at 8:30. So we do have some historical schedule changes we've made too.
It'd be nice if you had a printout of that. So the next work session, just so we have
Okay,
For
what
discussion.
historically used to be, and there were families at that time that did live on the island too, and there were people who worked
Mhm.
full time, they somehow never made it work, I don't know how, but. But they left meetings early to get to the ferry, so.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else? Okay, with
Thank you.
that, we're adjourned, thank you very much.
Good job, Rachel.
Great job, Rachel.